everybody. So today we're going to continue on with expanding algebraic expressions. Yesterday we started this topic by working with the algebra tiles, and we talked about how we're taking an expression in factored form and expanding it so that it's in expanded form. And really all this is multiplication, okay? When we're looking at an expression in factored form, this means 2 times y plus 3. And in order to multiply the 2 into each of those terms, we have to use the distributive property and multiply each term in the parentheses by the 2 that's outside of the parentheses. So as I just mentioned, we are using the distributive property to multiply the term outside to each term inside, and then once we do that multiplication, we'll add each of those products, keeping in mind that a negative term can also be represented with subtraction. So with all of that, let's go ahead and get to some examples. Starting with this first one. We have 5 times negative 2x plus 10. So we're going to distribute in this 5 to each of the terms. I like to draw little arrows so I know that the 5 needs to be multiplied by the negative 2x. And the 5 needs to be multiplied by the positive 10. Okay, then we multiply each of those. 5 times negative 2x is negative 10x, and 5 times 10 is 50. And that's really all you can do. These aren't like terms, so I can't add those together. Our final answer would just be negative 10x plus 50. All right, going on to this one. Again, this 3, we're going to distribute it into the 2x and the negative 6. So 3 times 2x plus, I'm always going to put a plus sign here no matter what. Okay, I'm always going to add, and then we can incorporate the negatives into our numbers. So this was a positive 3, and this is a negative 6. Since we're subtracting 6, can be considered as a negative 6. So 3 times 2x is 6x, plus 3 times negative 6 is negative 18. So you can leave it as plus negative. I just always like to write it in the form of subtraction. So I'll write my final answer as 6x minus 18. Okay, heading over to here, we'll distribute this negative 4 into each of these terms. So negative 4 times negative 2x will be first, plus negative 4 times, this is again a negative 6 since we're subtracting 6. And let's do this multiplication. Negative 4 times negative 2x would be positive 8x, plus negative 4 times negative 6 is positive 24. So 8x plus 24 would be our expanded expression. And you'll notice both of these terms in here were negative, and since we multiplied it by a negative, those canceled each other out and made our entire expression positive. All right, let's go down to here. We're going to distribute in this negative 3 to each of these terms. We'll have negative 3 times x plus negative 3 times 2. Well, negative 3x, it's already being multiplied together. Remember, when there's just an x by itself, it's kind of like a 1 in there. So I technically could have done negative 3 times 1x, which is just negative 3x. Regardless, it just stays the same. And then plus negative 3 times 2 is negative 6. So you could write plus negative 6, or as I mentioned above, we can just write it as minus 6. This one looks a little bit different. It's just a negative sign out in front of the parentheses. And just like with variables, when there's no number, it's just a negative sign, it can be represented with negative 1. So technically you could distribute the negative 1 or just distribute the negative sign. Okay, negative distributed into a positive 2x would be negative 2x, or because negative 1 times positive 2x would be negative 2x. And then same with this second term. Distribute a negative into a positive 3 would make it a negative 3, because negative 1 times positive 3 is negative 3. So really that's all we have there. When you have the negative out in front, it's just going to make each term inside the opposite. Okay, going on to this next one, negative 4 will distribute into each of these terms. We have negative 4 times x plus negative 4 times negative 3. So again, the negative 4x just stays the same. It's already being multiplied. And then plus negative 4 times negative 3 is positive 12. Also, I do want to say at this point that you probably, or maybe, are able to skip this middle step. You might be able to do the multiplication in your head, and if you can, that's fine. I just want to show all of the steps up here so that you know what I'm doing. All right, going down to this example with decimals. Remember, you can use your calculator, okay? So if this scares you, pull out your calculator. But I don't want you to forget our rules that we learned for decimals either. This should be pretty simple to do in your head, okay? Regardless, we're gonna distribute this in. That will give us negative 0.3 times 2x plus negative 0.3 times positive 5. Remember with decimals, multiply as if the decimal wasn't even there. So this would be like negative 3 times 2x, which is negative 6x. But then there was one decimal place in our problem, so we need one decimal place in our answer. So negative 0.6x would be the first term, plus negative 3 times 5 is 15, but we need one decimal place in our answer, so that would be negative 1.5. Again, I prefer it not to be written as plus negative, so let's just represent it as negative 0.6x minus 1.5. Okay. All right, and then going on to this last example for this part, we're distributing in negative 1/3 to each of these terms. Again, you can use the ABC button on your calculator when it comes to fractions, or this should be a pretty simple one to do in your head as well. Negative 1/3 times p just stays negative 1/3 p, and then plus negative 1/3 times, that's minus 2q, so times negative 2q. So our first term stays the same. And then plus negative 1/3 times negative 2q. Negative times negative is a positive, and 1/3 times 2 over 1 would be 2/3 q. Okay. The next problem is asking us for the area of a rectangle if the dimensions are 6, so we know one of the sides, and the other side we don't know, but we know it's 5x plus 3. And remember, to find the area, you do length times width, or you multiply the dimensions. So we would do 6 times 5x plus 3. And when we do that, just again, going back to the distributive property, 6 times 5x is 30x, and 6 times 3 is positive 18. So 30x plus 18, area is always measured in units squared, so I'll just label it units squared. All right. I didn't show the middle step here, and again, if you don't need to, that's fine. But again, we did 6 times 5x to get 30x, and 6 times 3 to get 18. All right, and then our last section here, we're going to actually combine what we're doing now with expanding expressions with what we did in our last topic of simplifying expressions. I actually think these problems are super fun, but I'm kind of a nerd, so maybe you'll feel that way, maybe you won't. But remember, if you ever have like terms in your expression, once you expand it, then you can always simplify, you can always combine those. So let's take a look and see what I'm talking about here. So within this expression, we have 4 times 2x plus 1, and then this plus 3x is not in the parentheses. That means this plus 3x is not being multiplied by 4. And order of operations says you need to multiply first, so we have to expand these expressions first before we do any combining or adding of the like terms. So let's distribute in this 4 first. Let's do the multiplication first, and we'll get 8x plus 4. 4 times 2x is 8x, 4 times 1 is 4. And then again, don't distribute the 4 into the 3x because it wasn't in parentheses. It wasn't being multiplied. So we're just going to carry down that plus 3x. And now we have an expression that we were working with last week. We have like terms of 8x and positive 3x. If you need to get out your coloring supplies, you can do that to circle those. And that gives us 11x and then still just the plus 4. So that would be the final answer for that expression. All right, let's move on to this next one. We have 7 minus 2 times the quantity of x plus 2. Okay, so we want to do the multiplication first. And I also want to point out that since we're subtracting this 2 times x plus 2, that I'm going to distribute a negative 2 into each of those terms. I haven't done anything with the 7 yet, so I'm just going to carry that down. Again, this is going to be a negative 2, so I'm just going to throw the plus sign in there and incorporate this as negative 2x plus negative 2 times negative 2, or times positive 2. And again, let me break it down here. Negative 2 times x is negative 2x, and negative 2 times positive 2 is what I'm doing over there. Negative 2 times positive 2 is negative 4. So I'm actually just going to erase that and replace it with a negative 4, if it lets me. Uh-oh. There we go. And now we can combine like terms. Okay, we have a positive 7 and a negative 4, which would combine to 3. And then plus negative 2x or minus 2x is what's left over. All right, let's go on to this next example. Again, start with the expanding, start with the multiplication. So 4 times p and 4 times 5q. You get 4p plus 20q. And then again, that minus 3q is outside of the parentheses. You don't want to distribute into that. So we'll just leave that as minus 3q. And then from there, we have like terms. We have 2 terms with q, so positive 20q and negative 3q can combine to 17q. And then just carry down that plus 4p. All right, 2 more. Negative 2, we're going to just start by distributing that in because multiplication, again, comes before any addition. Negative 2 times a half, or half of 2, is 1. So that would be negative 1x, or you could just represent that as negative x. Negative 2 times negative 3 is positive 6. And then just carry down this plus x. Then our like terms here would be the negative 1x and the positive 1x, which will disappear. If you think of it in terms of algebra tiles, those would disappear or they add up to 0, just leaving us with 6. All right, and then our last one Again, start with distributing. 2 is going to go into each of those, would give us 4a. 2 times 2a would be 4a. 2 times 3b would be 6b. And then we're going to add on these extra terms, plus 5b minus a. And then from there, we have a couple of sets of like terms. We have 4a and negative a, along with 6b and 5b. And when we combine those, 4a and negative a would be 3a, 6b and 5b would be 11b. All right, so I know that was a lot, but I wanted to go through a lot of examples so you could see a lot of ways to solve each of these problems. And now it's your turn to practice, so good luck.